The cheese landscape is punctuated by myths and legends, only some of which hold any water. Want to know which stories have as many holes in them as Swiss cheese? These are some of the top contenders for cheesiest myth. Americans and Brits are accustomed to orange cheese, as any stroll through the local dairy aisle will show. Shades of beige and a few small pops of orange appear in the form of cheddar, red Leicester, Shropshire blue, or French mimolette. But despite the omnipresence of this rusty hue, it turns out that orange cheeses are far from natural.
All cheddar really is white. All cheese really starts out white.
Coloring cheese orange was originally a marketing trick dating back as far as 16th century England. Spring and summer milk is naturally richer in beta-carotene, given the grass-fed diet of cows. In winter, milk tended to be whiter, so enterprising producers decided to give it a little help and make it a touch more appetizing. This was further compounded by the fact that some dairy producers realized they could make more money by skimming the cream off their milk and selling it as is, or in the form of butter. This process further reduced the natural golden color of their cheese, making the food coloring all the more necessary. Originally, cheesemakers took advantage of turmeric, carrot juice, or saffron to tint their cheese orange. In the 18th century, most cheese producers instead turned to South American annatto to infuse a golden hue without any added flavor. And today, annatto still gives orange cheddar its recognizable color. It's tempting to assume that the ooze of a great Brie or camembert comes from its high fat content. But if you think fat makes cheese fluid, you'd be mistaken. Runny cheeses get their texture due not to more fat, but rather a higher water content. In reality, it's the dense, harder cheeses like aged cheddar or Parmesan that have more fat, with cheddar typically boasting about 35% fat as compared to just 30% fat in a cheese like Brie. It's no surprise that the best Comté and Gruyères melt in such a beautiful, buttery way. The exception to this general rule is the category of double or triple cream cheeses. As the name suggests, these have been enhanced with cream for an even more luxurious texture. That said, even a triple cream Brie doesn't hold a candle to cheddar, with just 32% fat. The rest of that rich gooiness is just water. A beloved topping for pasta, Parmesan cheese has more than earned its rep as the king of Italian cheeses. But while it's fairly evident that the shelf-stable jar and the massive wedge you'll find at your local Whole Foods aren't the same, the truth is that the world of Parmesan is murkier than it seems. Parmigiano Reggiano is the name of the PDO, or Protected Designation of Origin, cheese made exclusively in 5 regions of Italy: Parma, Modena, Reggio Emilia, Bologna, and Mantua. This cheese is made according to strict rules. It must be made with raw milk, and it undergoes strict quality controls to ensure it adheres to the expected flavors and permitted methods of true Parmigiano production. Parmesan, on the other hand, is not a regulated term. This cheese can be made anywhere, including in the US, and is usually significantly cheaper than true Parmigiano Reggiano, which retails for about $1,000 a wheel. Some American-made Parmesans, like Wisconsin's Sartori, are pretty respectable, winning multiple awards like a gold medal at the 2016 Global Cheese Awards. However, others are known for cutting corners in unpalatable ways, notably pre-grated versions that have been bulked out with cellulose. A truly delicious cheddar or Parmesan often stands out thanks to its texture, boasting lovely, crunchy crystals in every bite. But while these crystals may crunch like fleur de sel, this texture doesn't come from salt. Cheese is indeed salty. Your average cheddar contains 190 milligrams of sodium per ounce. But the salt is added so early on in the cheesemaking process that it would hardly remain whole and crunchy after weeks, months, or even years of aging. So what are those little crunchy bits in your cheese? The answer is, it depends. In the case of cheeses like cheddar, these crystals are generally calcium lactate, which forms as lactose breaks down and lactic acid begins to form. This acid binds with calcium ions in the cheese, and calcium lactate forms, mainly on the surface. These little crystals don't taste like much in and of themselves, but their presence is a good sign the cheese has loads of aroma.
Creamy, salty, sweet, and oaky nuttiness. You detect that?
Oh, I'm detecting nuttiness.
When it comes to Italian Parmigiano Reggiano, Dutch Gouda, or Swiss-style Gruyere or Comté, this crystallization comes instead in the form of tyrosine, an amino acid with loads of crunch. These crystals tend to be found not on the surface of the cheese, but rather in the center. Since tyrosine is used by the body to create dopamine, a hormone associated with pleasure, its presence can increase your perception of the deliciousness of a cheese. The rinds of some cheese like Comté and Parmesan are too hard to be easily enjoyed, although these rinds work wonderfully to suffuse soups and stews with flavor. But in the case of other cheeses, the rind is part and parcel of the eating experience. Such is the case with the white exterior of Brie. Brie is a member of the bloomy rind family of cheese, a category that also includes French Camembert and American Mountam. White rind comes from a combination of molds like Penicillium candidum or Penicillium camemberti and fungi like Geotrichum candidum. While that might not sound super appetizing, the reality is that these little microorganisms lend loads of flavor to these cheeses, particularly a woodsy, mushroomy aroma.
The white rind on the great soft ripened cheeses like Brie and Camembert? All mold. But go ahead and take a bite.
Not only is the rind of Brie edible, but it's also delicious. Carving it away isn't just a bad idea, it's also kind of rude, at least if you're in a group setting. If you find it tough to swallow, you don't have to eat it. But you shouldn't be scooping the inside of the cheese out and leaving the rind behind. Instead, serve yourself a slice and discreetly pare the rind away, leaving it on your plate rather than the communal board. From the rind of Brie to the blue veins in Gorgonzola, mold is pretty omnipresent in cheese from the get-go.
Take some milk, add a little bacteria, some mold, maybe a few mites.
Cheese is just a means of a controlled spoilage.
But what about when a piece you've had sitting in the fridge develops a new patch of white, blue, red, or even black mold? While it's not advised to consume any mold that wasn't there when you bought the cheese, you don't have to toss the whole piece just because it's developed some new color. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recommends trimming an inch around the moldy spot on any hard cheese and discarding only this portion, retaining the rest of the cheese to enjoy. Other sources say you can just scrape the mold away, noting that with soft cheeses, it's best to cut away at least a quarter inch if there are any moldy spots. In any case, white or green mold is far less worrisome than anything black or gray, which you'll want to remove entirely.
Is that goat cheese?
Chèvre, yes, that is a goat cheese.
Because I have a lactose reflux and I can't.
You're lactose intolerant?
When it comes to soft, creamy cheeses like ricotta, cream cheese, or chèvre, however, it's best to err on the side of caution and toss the whole container in the trash, seeing as the mold can proliferate quickly in this damp environment. The same holds for any pre-shredded or pre-grated cheese, which is likely contaminated far past what's visible to the naked eye. The idea that cheese gives you nightmares is an oft-repeated old wives' tale, linked in the minds of many to the bacterial cultures that give cheese its flavor and funk. For this reason, blue cheese is said to be the guiltiest party in turning your sweet dreams sour. One 1964 report in the British Medical Journal did indeed seem to show a correlation between cheese consumption and bad dreams. It hinged on the experiences of one man who ate an ounce or two of cheddar every evening and suffered horrible nightmares. The moment he removed cheese from his diet, he was miraculously cured. But according to experts, this link is far from verifiable. If anything, cheese seems to improve sleep quality, at least according to a 2020 study in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. Psychologist and sleep scientist Teresa Schnorbach hypothesizes this may be due to the presence of tryptophan, which is a precursor to melatonin, the hormone that helps our bodies know it's time to go to sleep. And while eating anything late at night is likely to contribute to sleep disturbances, choosing cheese isn't necessarily going to make your dreams any scarier. While proponents of a vegan diet eschew anything but plant-based cheese, vegetarians may want to avoid some members of the category as well due to the presence of an ingredient known as rennet. Rennet contains enzymes that help force milk to coagulate, essentially transforming it into cheese. In most traditional cheese-making practices, the substance is sourced from the stomach linings of certain young animals, like calves, lambs, and kids. The animals must be slaughtered to obtain it, which means the cheese isn't suitable for consumption by vegetarians. Luckily, there are other options out there. Some cheese producers use vegetarian rennets, which may be derived from plants like artichokes or thistles. Microbial rennets made from mold or yeast can also be used. Genetic engineering has given rise to fermentation-based rennet, which emulates animal rennet by genetically engineering bacteria, fungi, or yeast to produce the same compounds. Lactic fermented cheeses, like some chevrets, are made entirely without rennet. All that to say, if you're avoiding cheese because of issues with animal rennet, you've got options. While raw milk cheeses are fairly omnipresent in countries like Switzerland, Italy, and France, strict laws in the US preclude most places from selling any raw milk cheese aged less than 60 days. This has led many consumers to believe that raw milk cheeses, also known as unpasteurized cheeses, are unsafe. But this is far from the whole story. Most cheese sold in the US is made from milk that has been pasteurized, a process that heats the milk to kill off any microbes, including dangerous pathogens.
Before we knew to heat milk up to kill harmful bacteria, including Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, it was dangerous to drink.
But the question we should be asking ourselves is how these pathogens got into the milk in the first place. The factory farm industry in the US sees many dairy cows kept in poor conditions that contribute to a rise in these and other pathogens, making pasteurization a necessity to keep them out of milk and cheese. But when raw milk is produced cleanly and responsibly, it's just as safe, if not safer, than pasteurized. The flavors of raw milk cheese, which retain all of the good microorganisms that link to its terroir, are truly incomparable to pasteurized. Plastic wrap slices of bright orange American cheese are often described in less than tantalizing ways by connoisseurs, with some evoking their plastic-like texture, long shelf life, neon color palette, and unnatural melting capabilities as just some of the reasons they should be categorized not as cheese, but rather as a cheese product.
These pasteurized processed cheese food slices can make your basic tuna salad sandwich pretty special.
But while American cheese does indeed include other ingredients, like added milk, cream, whey, or emulsifying salts, there is an argument for letting it be called cheese. Processed cheese got its start not in America, but rather in Switzerland, where, in an effort to reduce food waste, cheese scraps were melted together to create a cheese-derived product. The process was perfected and patented by James Kraft in 1916, who then brought the product to America, the country with which it is now most often associated. These days, processed cheese does indeed begin with real cheese. Of course, not all American cheese is created alike. Strict labeling guidelines established by the Food and Drug Administration dictate what can and cannot be included in 4 categories of similar sliced cheese products. Pasteurized processed cheese is the one with the shortest ingredient list, seeing cheese combined with cream, water, salt, food coloring, spices, and an emulsifying agent. It's by many accounts the perfect ingredient to give your grilled cheese sandwiches that perfect ooey gooey texture.